Benjamin, you are the director of Migration.
Isn't it beautiful?
This is awesome.
Oh, maybe we should go say hi. Hey there.
Dax talked to a girl.
A girl?
He wants to marry her.
What? I didn't say that.
You said it with your eyes. What?
They must be migrating.
Migration? What a stupid idea.
Okay, you're impossible.
Because I found a safe place for us to live.
I want us to get out and see the world.
What sort of father would I be if I put my young fowl in harm's way for no reason except a chance at a Caribbean vacation?
I don't want to miss out on life because you're afraid to leave this pond.
How on earth did that happen?
Yeah, still asking myself this very same question. but yeah, it was actually a bit weird the way I arrived on the not weird, but it's just that I was, it's Illumination, you know, like reached out to me and told me they had maybe a project for me, and I was like, well, I don't know how to do 3D movies, and so I don't know if I can do that. And I went there because I was polite, you know, and thinking, okay, we'll see how it's going to go and everything. But the producer, so Chris Meledandri, the guy who built and, you know, like who funded Illumination Studio and everything, he told me that he had a pitch, and he pitched me the idea of Migration. And I have to be honest, I felt like the story was very strong. You know, it had this thing where it had a sort of like serious theme, but at the same time we wanted to treat it in a very light-hearted way, which is the thing that I love to do the most. All the projects that I worked on always have this very heavy kind of subject, but treated in a very light-hearted way. The Big Bad Fox being, you know, like a fox wanting to eat children, basically. So it's sort of like a bit dark, but, you know, like treated, you don't really realize that it's dark. So I just said, honestly, I can't do those movies that you do, but if I can help, I'd be happy to help, and, you know, I will bring what I can, and I'm curious to work this way. I was very keen on trying to work, having the experience on Hollywood studio, and especially the group aspect of it, you know, like just not being the offer, but more like we're all the offer, we're trying to work together to do the best we can do. And I said, okay, let's try the experience and see how it goes. And if it's not working, I will leave, or, you know, he will fire me anyway. So no worries, you know, like we see how it goes. And 5 years later, he kept me for 5 years. So I felt, you know, like we did the movie completely. And it was great. I mean, it was a great experience. There were a lot of great things. There were a lot of things that was, you know, like concessions or stuff like that. But generally speaking, it was really a fantastic journey, you know, like just working on this project.
You know, you seem to be part of this great tradition, I would say, in animation, which is using animals to tell a human story, right? Ernest and Celestine, Le Grand Méchant Renard, and now Migration. Why animals? Tell me, why animals all the time?
Well, the first thing is I think I'm more comfortable drawing animals since I'm a kid. Even when I started like studying drawing and everything, I was so bad at drawing humans. And at some point, our teacher, he took us to the zoo, you know, in Paris. There's a very bad zoo because the animals are treated in the worst way possible. But the great thing is that they're very close to us, so we could draw them. And I realized I was so much comfortable drawing animals. That's one thing. But the other thing is, since I'm a kid, you know, I've been always fascinated by those fable animal tale, you know, like La Fontaine. There's a huge tradition of that in France, with La Fontaine, with the lion and the rat, the ant and the grasshopper or something like that. But so and it always fascinated me. You know, I've always had this love for telling stories about humans, but using animals, because there's this great thing about that where you can talk to anyone. You remove all the cultural boundaries. You just talk about human, and that's all, like the human spirit, and you can also use the animal, you know, like a sort of like prejudice that you can have. Like a pig is going to be a character that loves to eat, or that's a bit dirty. A wolf is going to be cruel. A fox is going to be, you know, like a very wise and sneaky. And you can play with that. You can do the opposite. You know, you can play with the prejudice of that. And And that's the fun of it, you know. And with ducks, you know, you can use this sort of like innocence that they have, this sort of like those very human characters, because it's very grumpy. I would say French characters in a way, but ducks, they have this sort of like wang, 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 kind of attitude that's really making them very relatable in a way. And at the same time, they're so innocent and inoffensive, you know, like they are not predators at all, like they can't hurt you at all. So it was great for the scale of the journey they were about to do. You know, like you could tell that it's not a goose that is strong, and you can tell that they can fly miles and everything. A mallard, they're migrating, but you're almost surprised to learn that they're migrating, the mallards. It's such an innocent creature and inoffensive that it was working really well to give amplitude. And then you can use this sort of like, you know, like human relatability with them. And again, you know, like you don't care if the person watching the movie is French or German or American or Chinese or anything, you know, like they're going to relate to the characters because they're animals, so you forget about the cultural aspect of it.
But, you know, it's so interesting as well, like, because I can see your hand when you draw, right? I can see the motion in it in your drawings, especially as I keep harping on about Le Grand Méchant Renard. I just have it here. I'll just pop it up. Like you can see your hand on film here, right?
Yeah.
And even with Migration, I can still see that touch of your hand in these characters, and I'm just so curious to understand the visual development of you coming on board. Obviously, you speak with your hand very well, and how that then translated into CGI characters.
Well, the thing is, at Illumination, they have, you know, there was Eric Guillon, who was the designer of most of the Illumination movie. And if you watch his drawing, it's so 2D, like it's so, it's almost like Sampé drawing, you know, like it's almost like Gaston, you know, like very French kind of cultural drawing
Very
style.
graphic.
And so they are really used to in the studio to translate this sort of 2D style into 3D. They're really good at it. So when I came in, there was this sort of like, I draw a lot, of course, because that's my way of expressing. I'm very bad at talking and expressing myself with words. I tend to say way too many words to express one single idea. So I use drawing a lot, and I draw a lot, and so in a way, I think it's sort of like passed through, you know, like the 3D, and I think we managed to get those elements and translate it into 3D, and because they're so good at this, and they're so eager to sort of like have a specialty in their design and everything because of this sort of like love of 2D. And I would say that it's mostly translating, I think, in the secondary characters more than the primary character in this movie, because, you know, the primary character is more like studio-driven almost, because they are more going to be. But for example, I know that Harry and Erin, the herons, basically, you know, there's two herons in the movie, and it's very close to the drawings I made in the storyboards. You know, like they're very, very close to that. And the interesting thing is that they cheated a lot, you know, like the characters, because they could see that I was drawing in a specific way, in a way that 3D was not possible to translate because I was not respecting the 3D volume. And they really tried to find ways to, you know, like translate that as well. So it was sort of like, I was talking with my 2D words and they managed to translate it in 3D. That's what was great, again, as a group work on this project, to the benefit of it,
You really see it in like held poses, you know, the rat when he's screaming.
Yeah.
That really feels like, you know, when your storyboard's brought to life, or any kind of splatted characters on the screen, or
you shouldn't move the camera an inch on this shot because you would see that the rat is like completely.
Exactly. But having said that, you've paired it beautifully with very painterly aesthetic. You know, in the background. The sunrises, the color of the clouds, everything. You spend a lot of time up there. Could you talk a bit more about the visual development in that sense as well?
Yeah. It was a tricky process because you know, it was a road trip, and the subject of the film being, you know, like get out of your comfort zone and you will be rewarded with emotions. Basically, you know, you will be rewarded with new things evolving, and so we knew that those sets had to be sort of like rewards for the characters and for the audience, like to be emotionally like grabbed by those landscapes. And so obviously, like all the artists started like doing like those wonderful scenery with like a best of beauty with those clouds that were magnificent, like those romantic paintings where you have a best of everything, you know, like the cloud, the sun is perfect, the ray of suns are perfect, like everything's perfect. And when I was watching the concept art, I was a little bit bothered because I said, there's no way you can gather so much beauty in one single place, you know, and we have to really think, how can we, you know, like we have to make sure that the audience watching the movie and watching a set will feel that this emotion that the characters are feeling is the same emotion that they might have felt, you know, doing a hike and seeing a sunset or anything, you know, or just being outside and all of a sudden there's, you know, I don't know, like it's raining but it's beautiful because the sun is casting or something like that. So I really asked them to be careful with that, you know, like, and I think the impressionistic painters were very interesting for that because they were capturing those moments. You know, you could tell that those people were outside. They were staying hours outside and just captured something that lasted for 10 seconds that had this sort of like strength. And you know, that's sort of like what led me to ask them to really think through when they're doing a set of thinking, how do you make this, think of an ordinary set, but how to make it unique, you know, like how to make it like, and that's why we looked for references and stuff like that that felt like had this sort of emotion within it, yeah.
What really comes to mind as you're speaking there is that you're trying to create an experience, right? In experiential, and we're talking visually as well, but you know, a big part of the story then is sound and music. Right?
Yeah.
I thought the music in this was really fabulous.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because it's a press junket. I actually mean that it caught me emotionally.
Yeah.
You know, it really caught me and swept me up in those moments. And I really find that it elevates those scenes.
Well, I'll be very honest with you, you know, like before we started doing the music, I thought the film was a big crap, you know, like I felt like there was no emotion in it. It was really a waste of time. Like, you know, I spent 4 years working on this movie and it was pure waste and everything. Nothing's working, the emotion's not there, etc., etc. And John Paul came in, you know, like the composer. And honestly, he changed everything. Like at least for me, you know, from my perspective, probably because I spent 4 years on the movie, I couldn't feel the single slight of emotion. But he came in, and the very interesting thing with him is that he's extremely focused on the narrative. Like he doesn't talk about music. I mean, it's funny because it's like, you know, you're talking about the narrative and he will translate it into music. The same way as a director, you know, we talk about narrative and I translate it into drawing. And he does exactly the same thing with the music. So that was just amazing because we were watching a sequence and I was trying to explain what he wanted to do. He was telling me how he felt, what he understood from the sequence. And so we could discuss. Oh, sometimes I was telling him we're supposed to feel that, and he said, "Oh, I didn't get that at all." So we need to make sure that the music is going to help, you know, taking us into that direction. So honestly, it was really one of the best experiences of my life working with him because also he's so nice, and he has this thing where he wants. I can tell that he wants people to be happy, you know, with working with him. So he likes to joke, he likes to be, you know, like in a good mood. And that's something that's very important for me, like to work with people who likes to laugh, you know, like just because it's making it more pleasant to work together and everything. So it was just a blast. And he has dogs, I love dogs and everything. So I just like spend my time over there, like just scratching the dog and listening to music, which was the best time of my life. And most importantly, he managed to make me have little tears again watching, you know, the movie that I made and thinking that those 5 years were not a waste of time, you know, like, so that's, I can't thank him enough for that. He literally saved the movie, you know, at least from my point of view, probably I was wrong, you know, but from my point of view, he made this movie like 100,000 times better than what I thought it was about to be, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's John Paul. Like he's honestly, his music is just so crazy good. So that was he's great guy.
It was crazy.
Sorry, I'm in love
so
with him.
Crazy
I think it shows now. So yeah, that's.
Listen, you know, I too. The second, I can't remember when it was, but it totally swept me in. And of course, you know, as any person in my field, you're given a film to watch, and it's hard to stop my critical mind working, you know, and seeing patterns and beats and narrative flows, right? Because you're always aware of you're setting this up now to pay it off later.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
aware of that. And it's very hard to surprise people like that. But when you suddenly hear this music, or a joke makes you laugh, or something, it takes you out of that field and just sweeps you along into the story. And the power of that music to do that was just phenomenal, like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
and truly. And don't cut yourself too bad. It wasn't crap.
Yeah, yeah.
Visually,
Thanks,
anyways.
thanks.
It wasn't crap. I really enjoyed it, I've got to say. And you get out of that. You set up a lot very early, very succinctly. You don't have a lot of time to set a lot of things up before they're off.
Yeah, yeah,
You're more focused on the adventure, the road trip.
yeah.
So let's talk a bit then. This is kind of like some great family road trip, like a National Lampoon or something.
Yeah.
It's this kind of strange Little Miss Sunshine-esque van road trip without the van.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that already in place when you came on board, or?
I mean, it was in place, like Mike White had written the script for 1 year with the producer, so I came in the first draft of the script. Not the first draft, it was like many drafts were made, so I arrived with a draft that was already quite finished and completed. And National Lampoon was mentioned, like there was a sort of reference that were mentioned. I tried to avoid watching too much of them, like just to be sure I was staying fresh, and because I don't like to do a movie having references to other movies. I'd rather have references of life and things, family-related things or anecdotes that are funny because they're so special and human-related, like real-related, and yes, so sorry, I lost track of the question right now. Like, you were asking.
Tell me about the story development. Yeah.
Yeah, the story development. Yeah. So basically, we based on we had this script and we started like just working on it, adding those sort of like sometimes the script was we were always adapting the script the way it was. And as you do it, you sort of like realize, oh, maybe something is a bit wrong here, or we need to make this a bit more special or more interesting and stuff like that. You also understand your film as you're doing it, your step by step. And so we were trying to find ideas left and right. And for example, there was some evolution which was great because Chris Meledandri, the producer, let me also add bring ideas, new ideas, if he felt it was interesting. He's always open for you to pitch new ideas and stuff like that. And Mike was open to that too, like Mike White let us do that. And there were a few examples like left and right where we could sort of like bring another way of doing the movie. And just to give you an example, the heron sequence, they were actually quite mean the first time they were meeting them, in the sense that when they were looking for their way to Jamaica because they didn't know, and they were in this sort of like bar that was filled with herons, like a house, like they were like bikers, like Hells Angels and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to eat the duck straight away, like there was no subtleties about it. And so I just said, we did this sequence and we realized, oh, it's a bit too early in the movie, to have such a bad experience. So let's try to make it, what happens if we play differently? And that's how I mentioned something that happened to me of me traveling in Japan and actually having a real fear of being eaten by a Japanese host, because on his hat the only thing he had written was "I am a cook," and it was in the middle of nowhere in Japan, in the mountains, in a very small town that gathered all the horror codes of Japanese horror movies, So the guy had a huge collection of Victorian dolls, like very creepy ones. So I was thinking this guy is going to eat us for sure, and of course nothing happened. But like the comedy of what we lived, I felt like there's a lot of comedy here, and even as a director, it's very interesting to play with this sort of prejudice that you can have with meeting someone new, and just because your fear is overwhelming you, you're going to judge this person because of that, and it was really fun to work on the sequence this way. So I pitched that, and we had the chance to change it. So throughout the whole movie, each time on each sequence, I could bring, like my own personal touch, and we could evolve my own, and also like everyone's personal touch, like to change the way we were perceiving the characters. Like Trump was quite different. She was more of she was a seed dealer, so she had this sort of like street kind of you know, like kind of attitude of, you know, like she had seeds that she was dealing with over birds. And I said, well, like, can we try to make her more like this? You know, like pigeons are the dumbest creature on earth, and she's more like taking care of them. She's more like, you know, like she's more like the how you call it, the mother of a lot of orphans, you know, and she's the only one having a brain, you know, like she has a genetic thing that means that she's smarter than every ordinary pigeon. So, you know, we could sort of like shift things left and right, also to make it more interesting based on the meetings the family had with those characters to change everything. And of course, there were a lot of evolution left and right. It kept, there's like 10 versions of every sequence that you can see in the movie, but the main course of the movie remained the same throughout the whole production. It's just that the dynamic changed a lot throughout the movie. The last example that we had was that Gugu, you know, like at some point they go in a farm where there's where ducks think that you know, they worship humans, or they think that humans are worshipping ducks or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that in one of the versions of the script, Gugu was the bad guy. Actually, he knew that the humans were, you know, like feeding the ducks and everything. And I love this idea, but you know, for different reasons we had to change. It was a bit too dark, which I loved myself, but you know, like we couldn't keep that. So yeah, it was very interesting, like just this way of proceeding. It's a little bit discomforting because you never know. You know, the producer is always open to change things, so it's a bit hard to keep the global picture like remain the same, but you're always looking for something fresh and new, and that's how we can come up with and I think it's the strength of Illumination is making the sequence so effective, you know, like that's what I learned from them, is making one sequence so effective, yeah.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. It's a pleasure to talk to you finally in the flesh. I was hoping to catch you at Annecy this year, but I didn't get to. So next year, hopefully I'll see you there.
Hopefully, yeah, that will be my pleasure. Yeah, with pleasure.
Listen, good luck, my friend. Okay, and thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.